do is, of course, connect to some data. I don't need to understand the structure of that data, but I have a lot of choices of various flat files and then various server-based systems. These are some of the most popular ones, but there's a lot of different data sources that we can connect to. It could be to Amazon, Google Analytics, to IBM DB2, of course Microsoft and Oracle, Salesforce, and so on. For this demonstration, we're just going to connect to an Excel file. And I'm going to select one. But before I do that, let me actually go into the file itself so that we can see what that file looks like. And you'll see it's a standard Excel file. In this case, it's sales data over 4 years, and it's several customers from various locations, in this case data from the United States. It's not a terribly large file. It's 8,400 rows, but you can see it's a pretty standard Excel file. So I'm going to select that file that I just looked at, and we'll open that up. And when I select it, Tableau will connect to that data, and we'll start analyzing it and placing it into the Tableau system itself. Now, data can be accessed either through a live connection or through a data extract. We might want to do a live connection if we have really fast access to the data itself or to a database, but that will impact performance, and your database people might not appreciate that. And if it's a very large file, you likely don't want to connect live either. Otherwise, we can simply make an extract, which is a copy that will store in the database in the Tableau engine in memory. So what we had with that spreadsheet were 3 worksheets. There was orders, returns, and users. And for me to start the system, I just take orders and I drag sheets here, it says. So I'll just drag them over, and that will analyze that information. And you can see it's replicated it out, basically what we had in the spreadsheet. There is also the ability within Tableau to do some data cleansing right here. This file really doesn't need it, but for instance, if there was for a location, if the street address and the city and the postal code or the zip code was in the same field, Tableau could easily split that out. This is one of the worksheets. If I take a second worksheet and drag it over, Tableau will automatically join that data for us, look for common parameters and join it. And we can see here what kind of join it made automatically for us. In this case, we're not going to bother with dealing with more than one worksheet, we're just dealing with orders. So let's take a look at what Tableau has done with that so far. It's brought it in and identified all of the elements of that spreadsheet as either dimensions or measures. And dimensions are really the things we want to slice or categorize, things that you would find in your headers or your rows in your, in your rows and your columns and rows. And measures are the continuous data that we want to aggregate up. Now we also have the ability to start organizing this data a little bit. For instance, we have product category here, containers, subcategories. Well, subcategory may be part of category, so I'm going to drag that up on top of it, and it just says, well, what do you want to call it? I'll just call it product. And you can see Tableau automatically builds some data modeling here for us. I can take product name and slide that up and say that's part of that hierarchical structure as well. And keep in mind, all of these changes I make here is strictly for formatting. I'm only dealing with a copy of this data. So we're not modifying the integrity of the data itself, and we're only working with a copy for visualization. But any of these changes I make are stored, and the next person can use them as well, or someone else, or if I want to use it later on, I can. In addition to that, the measures and dimensions are chosen by Tableau, but if you disagree and say, well, discounts is actually part of dimensions, I can just drag that up. It'll alphabetically place it there for us, but Tableau is not restrictive to enforce that it has to be a measure or a dimension. You can choose. So once we've done that, we can now start to explore this data. And fundamentally what we do with Tableau is we take a data set and then we visualize it in multiple ways and then perhaps collect those in the end to create a finished dashboard. So the first thing we might want to do is take a look at, well, where are our sales coming from? I'm just going to double click on state, and that will open up a map and place a dot in every location where there was a sale. And there happened to be a sale in every state. And if we hover over it, it will just show us the name of the state. I'll then double click on sales. That will tell the system to resize those dots to reflect the amount of sales that took place in that location. In this case, $1.3 million. And I can easily go into the system and tell it we want to change that number format and have it a currency and no decimal places, for instance, so that it displays the way you'd expect that to display. Same thing with profit. I can look at how profitable are we in various locations. Obviously, revenue is great, but we want to see how profitable we are. And Montana up here is not a profitable location, but I can change the color scheme so maybe I can see that a little more clearly. In this case, I might say I want to use the full color range, and I want to have a 6-step process. So now Montana is dark red, and highly profitable areas are dark green. This data is actually over 4 years of information. So I can take my order date, and if I slide that over, you can see everything is defined by columns and rows, but if I slide that over to my column, it tells Tableau, hey, make 4 columns out of this, 1 for each year, and that's now been done. And so when we use this in a visualization later on, we might want to allow the user to filter through and choose which year they're going to look at. So I have various options for that, including a multi-value drop-down. The one that I prefer is a slider. So I now have the ability to slide through and choose which year I want to look at. So this is now one view of this information. And so let's just call that sheet map. The second one we might want to look at is sales by order date. So again, I'm just going to double click on sales. In this case, I want to take order date and place it up on the columns. And that'll create a line chart for us. And in this case, you can see there's a plus sign here. Tableau has recognized years and quarters and months. So as we expand out this data, it will display all of the information that's inherent in that spreadsheet. We're looking right now at years by quarter, so all of the information is sequential. But if I chose to say, well, I would like to compare quarter over quarter, I can simply take the year information and slide it to the end, and now I'm looking at Q1, 2, 3, and 4. If I wanted to include all of this in one chart, which might be better, I can slide year over to the color chart, and now the years are all colored. And I might want to improve the visualization there by saying, let me see that per month. And then there's lots of other options to analyze this information and start looking at it in different ways, such as a running total, year-to-date total, maybe compound growth rate, what that might look like. So I'll just call this a line. So that's a second view of this information. Now a third view might be to start looking at the sales data that we have by the various products that we're selling. How are we doing across the various product lines? Well, we have product category here. I can slide that up to the columns, and you can see, just as with dates, a plus sign appears, allowing us to drill down. Now that drill down occurs because I've told it how to organize this information. So if I click on the plus sign, the product subcategory information shows up, and I can drill down from there and so on. And here is now all of the product information. Let's go back to the product subcategory, and here then are all the sales that we had. If I take profit and just drag that over on top of the chart, it redraws the colors to show me which is the most profitable and which is the least profitable. So we can see now tables, while sales are really good there, it's actually a very unprofitable area of our business. Let's take a look if that's consistent across various regions. If I take region and drag that over to rows, it tells the system, create a separate row for each region that we have. And now we see that the East is actually where we're really getting punished with furniture and tables specifically, versus the other areas are not doing so bad, and also in the central area we're doing poorly. I also have the ability to group various small sections like this together. I won't do that right now with the time constraints we have, but we can start cleaning this up. But let me call this then just products. The next thing we want to do, perhaps, is to create a crosstab. Even though that's not necessarily the best of visualizations for Tableau, we also have the ability to do that very simply. So I can duplicate this information and I create a crosstab. And to maybe make this a little bit more vivid of where we're doing well and where we're doing poorly, I can bring profit and bring that to the color shelf to tell the system color things according to how profitable they in fact are. And again, I'm just going to make that color a little bit more vibrant so that it pops out a little bit more. And we'll call this our crosstab. So the next visualization we might want to do of the same data is to say, I wonder what sales are like versus profit. So if I double click on sales and I double click on profit, you'll see that it changed from a bar chart to a scatter plot. Now, why did it do that? Well, Tableau's got this great little feature called Show Me, which tells me visually what are the best practices for the type of visualization you want to do. What would be the best options for that? So if I were to add something else to here to say I wanted to look at state, for instance, you can see it changes now to reflect what would be a better way to visualize that if you're going to include a geographical region. It's no longer necessarily the scatter plot. And it always highlights with a blue halo what is the best choice. And in this case, of course, it's likely going to be a map, which might make sense. But for us, in this case, we're simply going to say, let's compare sales to profit. It creates a scatter plot. It only has one point. It's total sales versus total profit. But if we take customer name and drag that onto the canvas, it will populate a dot or a circle for every single customer in this database. And there are 795 customers in all. I'm going to flip that around on the various axes. So we have sales going across here and profit coming up here. And these are for all of our various customers. And if we wanted to, we can take customer name and I can say, let's label each dot. And so that it becomes more visible what it is. But you can see also they're not overlapping the names themselves. Now we might want to organize this and take a look at, well, who are all these customers? Well, we have customers by customer segment. And if I drag that to the color shelf, it will color all of them according to small business, home office, corporate, or consumer. And by clicking there, I can easily see and dissect which is which. I may also choose to change the format of these circles to make them solid circles. And I often like to bring down the color a little bit, make it sort of transparent, and then put a border on that to make them pop out a little bit more and make it more visible. So now you can see one through the next. And we might also want to remove some of the outliers because maybe that's noise and we don't really want all those outliers because it's causing us to lose focus. So I'm going to exclude those and it'll redraw it for us. Now obviously some of these are doing better than others, and to get a better idea on that, we can include some trend lines. Now the trend lines can be edited, so I can remove the confidence band so it doesn't get quite as cluttered, and let's do that. And now we can start to see that home office is performing the worst, and in fact here we see small business is doing the best. We can also create sort of a magic quadrant right on here. We like this. Gartner, of course, rated Tableau as a #1 player in data visualization recently. And we like these ideas of magic quadrants because they allow you to slice your information into 4 sectors and seeing which one performs better. So we can put a reference line or a band here, and these can be of various sorts. I'm just going to use average for now. So this is then the average profit goes across here. And we can do the same thing for our sales. And this is now then the average sale. Therefore, these customers here are our top performing customers, both from a profit and a sales perspective. And these are our worst performing customers down here. Now, if we were to look at these customers and lasso them, I can start to analyze them specifically, and I might say I want to view that data. Who are these poor performing customers? And I can take a look at the underlying data as well. I might want to choose to export that, for instance, for some other report, or send them a reprimand email or something like that. So one of the things we might want to ask ourselves is, well, why is it some of these customers are performing poorly? What's going on here? And so we have the ability to look at that by saying, well, let's take a look at the discount. We obviously give discount to various individuals. What about if we're giving too big a discount? So if I take discount and drag that up to the color shelf, to the size shelf, the larger the circle now, the bigger the discount we gave. And we can see there are lots of big discounts here, but there's also a lot of big discounts up here. So it doesn't really give me a lot of new insight. What about unit price? The more expensive the product, the bigger the circle. If I take that up here, now we see a very solid correlation. A lot of these customers who we're losing money with, they're actually the high ticket items. And if we then analyze this further and say, we have 3 different product categories which we saw before, if I take them to the columns, I can analyze this by product category, and now we can see office supplies are really bunched together. There's not a lot of high performing or low performing customers. Furniture is in the middle of the road, but it's technology. That's where we're losing our money. So it's technology and high ticket items. So it's pretty good insight. And so let me call this just prod 2. Let's create another visualization. In this case, we're going to create one of taking a look at our customers. And so we'll look at sales and maybe by customer name. And we can then, of course, sort them. And this is now then by revenue. But let's take a look instead also by profit. So if I drag that over here, I get an image of how well people are performing for us based on how profitable they are. And we can see some of these here in red are performing very poorly for us. One of the things that we don't have here is gross margin. But I can create all kinds of calculated fields with Tableau. So I can say I want to call this gross margin. And you can see gross margin is not part of my measures currently. But we're going to create a gross margin calculation here. And the calculation for that is sum. And as I start typing in, you can see all the various calculations I'm able to do. It's the sum, and in this case it's the sum of profit, and I could simply type it in here, or I can just drag that over. So there's not a lot of typing required, and this is the only typing you'll ever see me do, divided by the sum of sales. And it comes up here and says that calculation is valid. So we'll apply that, and you can see gross margin now, or GM, is now included here. And it puts a little equal sign there beside it to show me that it's something that I created as a calculation. So if we now take gross margin and slide that over to the rows shelf, it creates a new row for us showing everything based on gross margin. And if I want to sort it by that way, I certainly can. Now it comes up and says 0.396, so we can go into that gross margin and we can change the way that number format is and say make that a percentage and don't have any decimal points. And now as we hover over, we'll get Stephen Ward, and the gross margin is 36%. So we'll call this customer. So we've created several views of this data. Now let's go ahead and create a dashboard. So here are the various views that we just created. We may not choose to use all of them, but it says drop sheets here. All right, well, let's start with map, and I'll bring that over. And here is then the map that we created. We're going to skip the line chart, but let's take a look at products and put that over here. And then we might want to take crosstabs. We'll pass on that one, but products, another product view is interesting for us to take a look at. And you can see it grays out where I'm allowed to drop these. And I can always resize these as I wish. And then customers, we'll put customers down here at the bottom. And let's make a little bit more space. So here's now a dashboard that we've created. And you can see The ability is still there for me to scan through which year I want to look at, but you'll notice when I do that, it updates the map, but nothing else in the dashboard. But I have the ability here to say, when you select a year, apply this to all of your visualizations that you just created. So now as we scan through here, you'll see everything is updating in the dashboard. That's pretty amazing and pretty powerful. Similarly, if I go down here and want to investigate why in North Carolina are we losing so much money, I can click on that certainly and get this pop-up information, but it doesn't affect the rest of the dashboard. But I do have the ability also to use this as a filter. So now when I choose to look at this specific state, everything in the dashboard will update to reflect who are those customers in that location and what's happening there. And of course I can do the same thing with any of these visualizations to make it more interactive. Now, one of the things someone asked me the other day is, well, what about other data? How do you bring in other data sets? Well, Tableau is actually really good at that. So if we wanted to start creating a new worksheet here, I can bring in a new data set. In this case, the data source will be just a text file. There happens to be shipping information that is consistent with these customers. So we're going to double click on that and bring that information in. And that's now been done. And you can see here, this is the shipping information that got brought in, and this is the ordering information that we were already working with before. And so let's take a look at our sales, perhaps, by customer segment, and look at our customer names on here in detail. And then we're going to go back into the shipping area, and you can see here Tableau has automatically linked information together, and it linked together customer name. So because it's done that, we can start including this into our dashboard. So we'll take shipping costs now and bring that up to our column. Tableau creates a scatter plot because it says, hey, that's the best way to visualize that information, and I'll call this shipping. So we go back into our dashboard that we created before, you can see shipping has now been included as one of the visualizations, and I'm probably going to violate every best practice here by bringing that into this visualization. It's going to get mighty crowded, but for illustration purposes, and there is now our shipping information that I brought in. And if I scan through this and go through from 2014 down to 2013, you'll see everything updates in the dashboard, including the shipping information.